Ouch, damn it. Do you ever start one thing and end up with another? A lesson and an exercise in making the best of a bad situation? Recently, I was giving a sustainable sewing class at our local community college, and one of my sweet students said, "Hey, I made a pattern for a pair of Thai fisherman's pants. Would you like a copy?" Well, like most sewists, I never say no to a free pattern, so I cut a quick copy of the simple outline on a piece of scrap fabric, and I brought it home to my studio. And with absolutely no idea how to make said pants, I got to work. That was my first mistake. Here I am explaining that A, I love baggy pants with a high waist, and B, that you can actually cut a pair of pants for yourself by grabbing a pair that you already own, folding them in half and loosely tracing around them, leaving space for a seam allowance. There are really only two measurements you need to make a pair of pants: your waist measurement and your hip measurement. And then you'll need to decide how long you want them based on how much or how little fabric you're working with. I didn't have much and I was determined to use it all. I happily dug out some gorgeous vintage fabric from my stash. It was a kind of a batik pattern, lightweight cotton I'd been dying to use. And without really checking anything, I got to work. The piece was 45 inches wide by 65 inches long, or about 1 3/4 yards. Not very big, but big enough. The fabric had a couple of tiny flaws, but nothing I wanted to bother my pretty little head with. I smoothed my fabric out on the table and laid my pattern piece on the folded edge, lining it up as neatly as possible. And then, just for fun, I added a couple more inches to the waistline because, as I said, I like high waists, and I also wanted to use that yummy border as part of my waistband. Like I said before, I didn't bother trying to find out any actual guidelines for making these pants work. I cut out 2 pieces of the pattern and things started getting exciting. Now, right off the bat, there were some issues with the fabric. It turns out I didn't really have enough fabric for these pants, and when I looked at what I'd cut out, there were some parts missing. But no worries, because I had some scraps I could patch them with, and anyway, those parts would be on the inside leg and wouldn't even show. Patching fabric pieces together is tricky. I don't recommend it at all. But I was on a roll and determined to use up this fabric and make myself some of these mysterious Thai fisherman's pants. You have to match the scrap fabric to the pattern, cut a piece out, allowing for seam allowances, and sew it together. Your iron is your best friend in this case. And anyway, we like patches, right? This part was murder and it took forever, but I carried on bravely. It looked pretty, scrappy right out of the gate, but that's the vibe we're going for, right? Eventually, I managed to get the 2 rather bedraggled pattern pieces ready to sew. Yay! I still hadn't learned my lesson yet, so I unfolded my pieces and I laid them right sides together, and I did a straight stitch along the outside below the crotch curve. You see that? That went fine, except for the part where the fabric, being old and apparently a little more fragile than I thought, ripped. Hey, have you heard of the Refashion Rebels community? If you want to know what to make that actually sells, where to list it so it doesn't sit forever, and how to turn scraps into steady income, you might need to be a part of the Refashion Rebels community. Right now it's free to join. All you need to do is comment Rebel and I'll send you my invite link. I built this for you. Come and see why. Yeah, there was a 4-inch tear into one of the pant legs. I was pretty horrified by that. But I had a couple of tiny scraps left, so I patched it again. And then I found some other small holes, and against my better judgment, I patched those too. By this time, I had about 4,000 hours into this garment, so to cut a long story short, I optimistically sewed together the crotch seam front to back, and I couldn't wait to try them on and show them off to my husband and daughter. What a disaster. I actually think that their laughter is still imprinted on the living room walls. And no, oddly enough, I did not feel inclined to have anyone take a picture of me at that point, but I will let you imagine what a somewhat short human being might look like wearing something shaped like this. Well, at this point, I started to re-examine my life choices. I won't say I felt defeated, but I will say that since I am neither Thai nor a fisher person, I'm not exactly sure what I was thinking in the first place. I started thinking maybe there was something I could do with this crime scene. Remember how the Thai pants pattern was placed on the fold of the fabric? Well, when they were opened up, they looked kind of something like this. So I trimmed off the crotch curves of both pieces, and I got this shape. The same waist measurement, but a skirt shape instead of a pants shape. Oh, it looked good, and I happily sewed the side seams together without giving a single thought to filming that part. I was on a roll. I like a slight high-low look on my skirts, so I laid out the skirt with the side seams matched in the center, and I freehanded a gentle curve from the front to the back. Things were definitely beginning to look up. I folded over the nice wide waist allowance, pressed it, and sewed it down all the way around except for a 2 to 3 inch gap at the back. Next, I sewed a straight stitch about 1/2 inch from the top of the folded over waistband because this is how a paper bag waist is created. It makes sort of a frill around the top of the waistband, and it's just my favorite. Realizing, finally, that my inspiration fabric was fragile, but totally unwilling to waste it, I decided to line it with some lightweight cotton striped fabric that I'd scored from a friend. I cut 2 pieces of the skirt shape from the lining fabric, but I made them a 1/2 inch smaller on all sides because it was an underskirt and I wanted it to sit properly. I sewed up the side seams of the underskirt and trimmed the seams using my pinking shears. This skirt is for me. I could never sell something so fragile to a customer, so the construction wasn't that important to me. Next, I pressed a 1/2 inch down from the upper edge of the lining waist toward the right side of the fabric. Now, there's a reason for this, and I'll show you that in a minute. Then I turned the main fabric inside out and pinned the right side of the underskirt to the wrong side of the main fabric, lining up the side seams and sewing it all the way around. I went back in and zigzag stitched all around that seam just for good measure. And now we've got a lined skirt. I just had to trim the lining, make a small hem on the main fabric, and find an old bed ruffle to play with. This is why I sewed the right side of the underskirt to the wrong side of the main fabric. I wanted to add a ruffle to the underskirt, and I wanted it to show below the main skirt and look cute, so the right side of the underskirt had to be the side that showed. See? I had tons of the bedskirt ruffle. It must have been a queen size, so I decided to sew it onto the lining or underskirt using a generous pinch pleat since I knew I wasn't going to run out of it. I pinned the pinch pleated ruffle onto the bottom of the underskirt. Oh, I wish I could do pinch pleats freehand like my friend Tracy Myers. Have you seen her channel, peeps? But alas, I can't seem to let go of my pins or my relentless pursuit of perfection. I top-stitched the ruffle with a zigzag stitch, just for good measure. Ooh, and now it was starting to look pretty delicious and I didn't want to stop. I found a piece of old crochet lace and had just enough to pin and sew all the way around the hem of the main fabric, making yet another layer of fun and frivolity. I added the waist elastic, which I totally forgot to film, and gifted myself a lovely skirt to wear made from fabric I cherished. Things don't always have to be perfect. They're perfect enough when they bring you joy. When you're smiling, that's perfection enough. I had a blast sharing this with you today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.